Okay, picture this. It's the middle of the night. You wake up, your feet hit the floor, and splash. A pipe just burst. Water is rapidly spreading out across your floorboards, it's soaking right into your drywall and creeping under those baseboards. You are officially on the clock. 90 minutes. That is the critical window you have before a professional extraction and rescue operation absolutely needs to be pulling water out of your home to prevent catastrophic long-term damage.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely demystify the intense science, the strict logistics, and the honestly fascinating technology behind professional property restoration. We are looking at exactly what happens when water turns from a life-giving source into a structural enemy.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our tactical 5-part battle plan for today. We'll start with the Belton water threat, we'll track the ticking moisture clock, break down water contamination, examine the actual science of drying, and finally, look at restoration and recovery.
All right, Part 1. The Belton water threat.
Let's start with a macro view of the unique battlefield we're operating on here. If you own property in Belton, Missouri, you are basically up against a perfect storm of geographical and structural enemies. First off, you've got those heavy Cass County clay soils. They just don't absorb water. They literally pool runoff straight against your foundation. Then, there's the seasonal flooding from Shoal Creek and Belton Lake. Inside the homes? Well, older neighborhoods are sitting on aging 1960s cast iron pipes that are quietly corroding from the inside out. But hey, it's not just the old homes. Newer builds with modern PEX plumbing are still super vulnerable to sneaky leaks right at the fittings. Add in those brutal winter freeze-thaw cycles that just snap pipes in your crawl space, and summer humidity in your Highway 58 and 71 that constantly hovers above 60%, and you've got a seriously relentless environment for water damage.
Moving on to Part 2, the ticking moisture clock.
Now that we've seen the macro threat from the city level, let's zoom right inside the walls of a flooded home because a microscopic, biological clock has just started ticking. So the crucial point is this number, 48. Because of that heavy, 60% plus Missouri humidity we just talked about, any moisture intrusion left sitting inside a home is an immediate red alert emergency. Within a mere 48 hours, microscopic mold spores begin colonizing damp materials. This isn't just about a wet, soggy carpet. This is about an invisible biological threat taking root right in your home's framing and drywall.
You know, you literally cannot fight a ticking clock like that with just a mop and some guesswork. That is exactly why professional restoration teams rely on the gold standard, the IICRC S500 standards. This is a strict, deeply science-backed playbook. It dictates exact, step-by-step procedures for classifying the water, calculating exactly how much drying equipment is needed based on square footage and saturation, and totally controlling contamination. It basically transforms a chaotic, panicky flood into a flawlessly precise rescue operation.
Which brings us to Part 3. Categories of water contamination.
Before the drying can even begin, the rescue team has to identify exactly what kind of liquid enemy has breached the perimeter. And what's really interesting here is that the science completely shatters the myth that all water damage is the same. It is absolutely not. We've got 3 distinct categories. Category 1 is clean water. Think, a broken supply line. Category 2 is gray water. This carries some contamination, maybe from a busted washing machine. And then we have Category 3, which fundamentally changes the rules of engagement.
Category 3 is black water. This is hands down the most terrifying enemy you can face in a restoration scenario. We are talking about gross sewage backups from clogged main lines or invasive floodwaters dragging in ground contaminants. You absolutely cannot simply mop this up. It is packed with hazardous bacteria. Dealing with Category 3 requires literally tearing out any porous materials that can't be sanitized, deploying incredibly strict safety protocols, and using serious, specialized antimicrobial treatments just to make sure the environment isn't toxic.
All right, Part 4. The science of drying.
So once the water is categorized and extracted, the real battle begins. When it comes to vanquishing the moisture hiding deep inside the architecture of a home, there is a massive, massive gap between the DIY approach and professional methods. On the DIY side, relying on a cute little shop vac only manages surface drying. The fatal flaw here is that water wicks straight up into the drywall and soaks deep into framing lumber where you can't even see it. Left alone, it inevitably leads to mold. But on the professional structural drying side, the heavy artillery comes out. We're We're talking thermal imaging cameras that actually spot temperature drops caused by hidden moisture behind the walls. We're talking calibrated moisture meters with penetrating pins and massive commercial dehumidifiers pulling moisture directly out of the air and the structure itself.
And all of that intense technology is deployed to hit one very specific, mathematically verifiable target: 15%. This is our magic victory condition. When the structural framing lumber and the drywall drop below 15% moisture content, they finally reach an equilibrium with the ambient Missouri environment. At this precise percentage, the structure is officially dry enough that mold simply cannot grow. Until those meters read 15%, the job is not done.
Let's move on and see how this builds into an overall operational timeline. Because this really is a high-stakes race against time. Those first 90 minutes are absolutely crucial for getting emergency assessment and extraction crews on site just to stop the spread. From there, we are frantically racing against that 48-hour mark where mold spores will start colonizing the damp materials. And then, utilizing all of that heavy industrial technology, it takes a solid 3 to 5 days of continuous structural drying to pull enough moisture out of the materials to safely hit that 15% threshold.
Finally, Part 5. Restoration and Final Recovery.
At last, we reach the light at the end of the tunnel. The chaos of the flood subsides, the heavy machinery gets turned off, and the operation wraps up with a proven 3-step system. Step 1 was the emergency assessment and extraction, identifying the water category and pumping out that standing liquid. Step 2 was the rigorous structural drying and daily monitoring with the thermal cameras and meters. Which brings us to Step 3, full restoration and reconstruction. This is the amazing part, where the damaged drywall is rehung, fresh insulation is installed, the floors are perfectly matched, and the new paint goes on. It is a highly structured, tested path from an absolute disaster right back to a safe, happy, and cozy home.
So, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative thought as we wrap up this explainer. Now that you know the science of how fast water destroys porous materials, and knowing that mold sets in within just 48 hours, if a pipe burst in your walls tonight, what is your 90-minute plan? Do you know who to call? Do you even know exactly where your main water shutoff valve is? Stay curious, stay prepared, and keep learning.